All right, everyone. Diversity Fuhrer Angela Merkel has seen fit to openly insult the United States and UK by saying, oh, Germany can no longer count on its allies. We need to go it alone. And I'll tell you what that really means in her coded socialist language, is that she wants to be the Lord and Fuhrer of all of Europe, is pissed at the UK for endangering the EU's globalist plot, which is the erasing of all sovereignty within Europe and the homogenization of the culture therein. One part of that plan, by the way, I don't know if people realize this, is to bring in enough refugees to cause enough social alienation to actually drive those same groups back out as part of a globalized sort of national imperialist plan. It goes well beyond the standard globalism into the realm of wanting to create one sort of European power state. It probably won't work because other groups look like they're ready to split off of Europe at the moment too. You have problems. The Eastern Europeans don't want to deal with the open border crap. Western Europe doesn't want to deal with giving out welfare payments to the rest of Europe. Southern Europe doesn't want to deal with austerity. The European Union is a failed project. It may be, you may think that it's well-meaning. I think you're foolish if you do. But it is a failed project. The thing is, the people of Europe thought more government will make us safer, it'll make us more prosperous. It doesn't work that way. We have the same problem here, where the states should be managing a lot of what the federal government does on their own. It would be more efficient, it would be more cost-effective, it would lead to greater competition, and down the road a better economy. And we've federalized so many things, we've nationalized them to the point at which it's difficult for them to actually do business for the most part. People in this country think it's a free market when 40% of their wealth is being squandered on bullshit all the time. In Europe, it's even worse in most of the states there. And with the EU, it's getting worse day by day. But did you imagine in your wildest dreams that a major Western European leader would attempt to diplomatically alienate the European Union from the US and UK? Now here's where the line is drawn. The rest of Europe now has to decide. Does it want to side with sovereignty with the US and UK, regardless of what it thinks about our domestic or foreign policies, and remain in NATO? Or does it want to have a European army side with the Germans and maybe the French? It's not entirely clear. And form sort of a miniaturized empire. That's the choice that you now have. It's being laid bare for you. The groundwork's already there. People suspected that this would happen. There have been more and more pushes for the European army, mostly from Germany, despite the fact that years ago they claimed no such thing would happen. There's been more of a push for open borders for people who, have never been in Europe before. When in the past they claimed that wasn't the case. There's more of a push to bring the Turks into line with European policies, despite in the past saying that everything, if Turkey was going to join the EU at all, it would be highly conditional. And Erdogan has gone in the totally opposite direction, and yet, still people talk about the need to, we need to admit Turkey or something like that. They're a dictatorship, and you get people like Merkel and Cameron that still want to let them in the EU. The EU has fallen. It's already crumbling. The Brexit was the first warning sign, the first foreshock of the greater quake to come. This is the second one. You've got the Chancellor of Germany openly, and she's not saying, oh, well, Trump this, Trump, I disagree with Trump, I don't like this that he said. She's saying she can't count on the United States as an ally. The Europeans can no longer count on the US. Who the hell else is going to safeguard your sovereignty? The EU obviously isn't going to. They don't believe in sovereignty. So who's going to save you from the big, bad, mean, propaganda-spewing Russians that you are so worried about all the time? Is it going to be the Germans who don't have nuclear weapons? Is Germany going to safeguard you? Or will it be the French? They have nuclear weapons. They have a standard modern military, but not as much power as Russia has in the military sense. Where are you going to get the diplomatic leverage to do all of these wonderful things that you imagine Angela Merkel is going to enable you to do? And she's going to want to be the one that's in power. She's going to want, if the EU army forms and things further go towards the post-national, that is the EU draws closer into an outright conglomerate as opposed to what it is now, which is a post-national confederation of sorts. Angela Merkel will be one of those people pushing for, we'll have like a revolving set of European heads of state that will run the whole arrangement. And who's going to get the first shot at that? It'll be Angela Merkel. She'll be the one that, because she's the one applying pressure very visibly to everybody in Europe, trying to bully them around into staying with the EU and allowing more and more power to Brussels. She'll be the golden one that gets appointed to that slot first. And she won't relinquish that power if she gains it. Now, there will be no rotating arrangement. Something will arise if she ever gets that mantle, so that she doesn't have to give that power up and so Germany can keep it forever. It's the long-term German plan, it seems, to take over all of Europe, and France right in with them in a Napoleonic sense. Why do you think that these are the two groups headed by globalists, pro-EU figures as they are? Why do you think, in any realm of imagination, intelligent, otherwise intelligent, individuals would want to safeguard a union that clearly does not work? Like on paper, if you just look at the results of the EU, its policies, it doesn't work for almost anybody in Europe other than a few corporations and the military-industrial complex of Germany. Why do you think that they would safeguard such a thing when it clearly doesn't work? It's because this sacred cow, which was decades in coming, is meant to displace all sovereignty in Europe. When people in the United States or the UK deride the EU, they are not deriding the domestic civilian population of any EU state. We are saying that the EU is crippling you, that we are worried about you because you're our fucking allies. That's what people are worried about. And Angela Merkel also wants greater power to censor the internet. The internet's a huge thorn in the side of all forms of globalism. Doesn't matter which kind it is, including Russian expansionism. Russia expands into one of its neighbors. Where's most of the resistance from? It's not coming from the corporate media. It comes from the internet. You remember the Ukrainian uprising and how fun that was with all the streams and people talking about people over there were building basically homemade catapults and lobbing Molotov cocktails, and the people were watching with great interest and largely said, well, the Ukrainians are obviously mad and we're going to back the Ukrainians. When Russia begins expanding, when it goes into Crimea, says, oh, okay, this is ours now, and eastern Ukraine is going to split off from the rest. Where was the main ire coming from? For all of this Russian propaganda that people keep talking about, mostly people opposed Russia at the time. There were some holdouts, I remember them. I sparred with them as well. I see Ukraine as a sovereign nation, Crimea being part of Ukraine. I don't care about some deal from 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Now it's been lost because of globalist leaders in the West doing nothing. And that was a slap against Russia by the internet largely. Now, the establishment politicians here, people like Angela Merkel or Obama, did nothing. So why are you going to put your trust in them? If you think that Russia, the big bad wolf, is going to come knocking at your door and try to steal your land or screw around with your elections, what power does Angela Merkel have to stop that? And what power, by the way, would Europe gain by conglomerating further? When it's just going to grind down the economy, increase social alienation, and not address the fundamental differences between the European cultures and economies that leads to the problem in the first place. It's like trying to create any other significant kind of union where the population is already large. It's not like the United States. When people try to conflate the U.S. with the European Union, they make multiple grave errors. The first error is that on the pro-immigrant side, when we enacted the Homestead Act, most of the immigrants coming in were European. That's one thing. They came into an area of vast empty land that had not been settled, which had the rudiments of infrastructure to allow people to move around and settle their plots. There was free land. There was a low population density in 90% of what has become now the United States, with all of the new states that were added over time. It was empty, there was infinite room for expanse, and immigrants were prioritized based on whether they would be willing to do the hard farming and mining labor and so forth, extracting resources and settling these areas to bring them about into having an economic output. That was the goal of the Homestead Act era. Population a lot lower, infrastructure very basic. Europe today is fully developed. It doesn't have a bunch of empty land. It has high population density. The people that are being brought into Europe, many of them are refugees that don't even want to be there. They're not going to settle in and start farming the land. They're not going to settle in and start mining salt or something like that, or mining silver and gold, like a bunch of dwarves living out in the mountains. It's not going to happen. You're already extracting all of your resources. Europe now is talking about letting some areas regress as the population begins to drop, because they've already hit, in most parts of Western Europe, critical population mass. They can't grow anymore. It's impossible, because if you expand your urban infrastructure, you're getting rid of farms, you're getting rid of mines, or you're felling what little forest is left in some of these countries. I had somebody the other day, I pointed out the difference between highly rural New England, specifically Vermont, and England. And I said, well, there are probably more forests in Vermont, which is a fraction of the size of the UK, than there are in all of the UK. Now, I used England. They then proceeded to counter with UK in total, which includes Wales and Scotland, which have quite large forest stands. And they didn't seem to realize, look at the difference in land area and the difference in population density. Yes, we have certainly per square mile far more forests than England does. There's not a whole lot of fallow land left, unless you intend to level the mountains and farm them too. I suppose you could mine them, mine out rock or something, but then you have to pay people's pensions and subsidies and stuff. It's not going to be economic. There's nobody you're going to be able to sell to other than maybe other Europeans. The idea of a European superstate, it's not the idea of a true empire. It's the idea of conglomerating a bunch of people together that were already working together well with one another, already weren't fighting one another for some time. The EU comes in and makes people bitter, because any decision that Brussels makes is not going to work for all the people of Europe. For all of the differences between the states here, and this is the second mistake they make, there is fundamentally, because all that immigration happened at a low density level and people began assimilating largely, at least into subcultures. Here we have American identity. There is no European identity. There are Polish people, there are British people, there are Irish people, French people, German people, Belgians. There are all of these different groups. But there is no European identity. Simply being part of that continent means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Merkel comes out, she wants to piss away the most powerful alliance, which is that between Western Europe and in the wake of the Iron Curtain, Europe at large, and the United States. That's not Trump saying that. Trump didn't come out and say, oh, I'm going to stop working with the fucking Europeans. I'm going to partner with the UK, but screw these Germans. Did anybody here ever say that? No, it's Angela Merkel saying that. And you look at our president and say he's unhinged. We are worried about the people of Europe. We don't want Europe to fail. It's like I make that Blackpool Cannibal video. And yes, I do, by the way, realize that's a 10-year-old article. Who fucking cares? It illustrates the point regardless. I make that video. On 4chan, some shill puts up a thread, oh, he's gleeful about the fact that some British girl got cannibalized. No, I'm pointing out that there are problems in Europe that Europeans don't appear willing to discuss. Those that do discuss it either are neo-Nazis or they're branded as neo-Nazis by the press over there. There's no free expression in most of Europe anymore. You look at these freedom ranking bullshit reports that they put out every year. Oh, Europe is so wonderful. No, Europe's not wonderful. Europe lacks transparency. Angela Merkel doesn't have any. She comes out and says, oh, you're going to have to do something about these burqas. I think we need to ban them. While she's campaigning. As soon as she's elected, she stops talking about that issue. And this happens in the political world anywhere that you happen to be. But it's most transparent over there in Germany and France and places like that. You think that a post-national authority is going to solve your issues? It's not going to solve the demographic crisis. It's not going to solve the crisis of having no additional land to settle. It's not going to solve the problem of any post-national program screwing at least one region within Europe because of the different economies of the nations of Europe. Unless you intend to create simply one whole overarching economy, in which case people get screwed anyway. People who are in less developed areas might feel they're not getting enough handouts, enough infrastructure. people in developed areas may feel that they're paying for the dead weight of others. It will destroy Europe. And Angela Merkel doesn't care. Her plan is, oh, well, if it starts to destabilize, we'll just have military law. Why do you think she wants an EU army? You think it's to fight the Russians? Like she's totally whacked out and she's totally suicidal, thinks that 8,000 Russian nuclear weapons wouldn't be more than enough to destroy all of continental Europe? Of course it would. And who would you be calling on to defend you? Would it be the Germans or would it be the US and the UK? I think it's probably the latter. The UK's still got its Commonwealth. They can count on Canada and Australia and New Zealand to come to their rescue. It's a large land area, quite a bit of manpower, and a huge amount of natural resources. And we've got as many nukes as Russia, the most advanced Navy and Air Force, a huge amount of manpower and resources, and the world's largest economy. Are you going to bet on these two groups, or are you going to bet on Germany? Germany, a shadow of its former self after 2 world wars, currently being run by an idiot. Angela Merkel is an idiot. She can pretend all day, oh, I'm high and mighty compared to this goofy Trump that they have in the UK, in the US, and UK politics. Oh, they left the EU. Well, shame on them. Angela Merkel's not going to be able to safeguard Europe. You're crazy if you think the Germans are even necessarily concerned about saving your ass. They'll use the Eastern Europeans as nothing more than expendable manpower, in association, of course, with all the refugees they're taking in, and put the screws to the rest of Europe. It will end up benefiting Merkel's area. Germany will once again become a massive industrial muscle, more so than it is now, which will lord over the rest of Europe. Through some legalistic process, she'll figure out how to do it. It just seems to be the MO of this sort of leader. So I would be very, very concerned. To you Europeans, you need to think long and hard before you consider giving Angela Merkel the kind of power that she wants. And you also need to think extra long about whether you want to alienate the US and the entire UK Commonwealth. Probably not the greatest economic decision that you could make. We've got a whole hemisphere that we can lord over. We can partner with people from Canada down to Las Malvinas, the Falklands. The UK has its Commonwealth. They can always partner with and trade with the Canadians, with the Australians, with New Zealand, with some of its, certainly India, some of its other former colonial territories. The Russians, they have their own sphere. China has its own sphere. Japan and South Korea and some of these other groups are aligned loosely with the West. We can work with all of them. Why would we want to work with the European superstate that, we wouldn't be able to trade with them? We wouldn't be able to. What the fuck are we supposed to do about that? You're going to get a post-national authority that's going to slap tariffs on everything anyway. You're worried about the U.S. putting a small tariff on goods due to a lopsided trade arrangement in which our goods are already tariffed constantly. Other people, they charge us money to send our goods into their countries, and then they whine and complain when we suggest that we're going to do the same for your goods. That's what Merkel has in mind. Oh, those Americans trying to have an even trade deal? Well, that's evil. That's not how globalism works. You're supposed to just suck up to Germany all the time. I'm glad the UK left. At least that's one state in that part of the world that we'll be able to continue trading with when the rest of Europe begins to collapse. And it will. You're going to fall on the monumental hard times. It's going to be like a new Dark Ages. You don't think it can happen because you've lived a sheltered existence. The Eastern Europeans know better. They lived behind the Iron Curtain. They know what it's like for a post-national authority to govern them, to screw them. They know what it's like. Western Europe, they don't care. They don't know what it's like. Nobody alive there ever lived under such a post-national authority. They don't understand. Western Europeans have lived a sheltered, gated community-style existence. They don't live the way the rest of the world appears to have lived. And so they get complacent. They think, oh, no need for war. But at the same time, we're going to create an EU army for no apparent purpose. We're not going to use it. We're just going to build it, for no Why do you think they want such a thing? To sit there and not use it? Or do you think they're going to go full imperialist mode? By the way, European states, you see some protests. People say, we don't want to pony up 2% of GDP to stay in NATO. Because that evil Donald Trump, he's not willing to keep paying for the whole thing, by U.S. taxpayers. Do you think if you create an EU military, you're not going to pay way more than 2%? No, you'd probably be paying 20 or 30%. Good luck. Good luck financing such a thing. You're already paying half of your economic output out in terms of welfare and pensions and things of that nature with your aging population. And to pay for immigrants that haven't bothered to assimilate, can't find jobs, are honestly screwed because there's no jobs for them to take. Even if they wanted to assimilate, there's no way for them to. You're going to pay for that forever. Now you're going to pay for a massive EU military force. I can't wait to see people protesting and complaining. And then Merkel will come out, chancellor of all the EU at that point, and say, you're just bigots. Just deal with it. Deal with the 70-80% tax rate that you're going to have to pay to deal with all of these things. It's going to be remarkable. The people will probably continue to deal with it for a while too. They won't raise any questions or any concerns. Oh yeah, I don't want to be called a Nazi. I don't want to be called a bigot. Meanwhile, Merkel is free to piss off the rest of the world, which is what she's apparently now pledging herself to doing. The US is problematic. They have free expression on the internet and people don't like the EU. Wow, I'd better insult them. What a great idea. Same with the UK. Wonderful. Merkel is going to make all of Europe a pariah. Nobody will want to. The Russians going to work with you? Does China seem like it wants to? No, China's going to work with the US before it works with the Europeans, including the rest of the Americas. Yeah, that's our territory. Straight up Monroe Doctrine, bitch. Deal with it. You've got Europe, and that's all you've got. Right now you can trade among these different European states to a degree, because there's interventionism, of course. Where else are you going to branch out into? Africa? You think they're going to want to work with you? They're not going to deal with that, with Merkel's strong-arm tactics. They'll work with the Chinese. They'll work with the Russians, the UK. They'll work with the US. But I don't think they'll work with a European superstate that's so bureaucratically strangulated that people don't even have any purchasing power anymore. It's what's going to end up happening. It's going to collapse your economies. Enjoy! That's about all. Peace out.